in Iran has a dire prediction for the United States. As we told you earlier this hour, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei telling supporters today that if Egyptian protesters, quote, are able to push this through, then what will happen to the U.S. policies in the region will be an irreparable defeat for America. That inspired some Iranians to take to the streets, yelling, "Death to America." So Iran is now making this about the United States, something Egypt has not done. Fox News Middle East and terrorism analyst Walid Faris is an expert on Middle East studies and religious conflict. Former ABC correspondent Bob Zelnick has covered Middle Eastern affairs since Mubarak first came to power. And Fox News contributor Judith Miller is traveling to Israel and Egypt later today to report on this crisis. And good for you, Judy, because that is a scary thing to do right now as we continue to watch out for our own crews who are very much in danger over there, as are all of the news crews over there braving these conditions. Panel, thank you so much. I want to start with this news out of Iran. Walid, let me begin with you. A dire warning from the Ayatollah in Iran that's inspired death to America chants on the street of Iran. What does that tell us?
Well, that's very logical coming from the leadership of the Islamic Republic of Iran, because they are under international pressure, under our pressure on the nuclear issue. So when our main ally, Egypt, which basically was supposed to be part of our coalition to put pressure on Iran, is under difficulties and pressures, then the Iranian leadership is going to signify to the United States that you cannot apply your sanctions against us. One major ally of yours is going to go down. Now, that raises another issue. If Khamenei is saying Egypt may shift to the other side, what force inside Egypt is going to shift it to their side? Well, obviously, the Muslim Brotherhood. This is additional evidence that Iran is looking at the Muslim Brotherhood as their potential future ally.
Yeah, and we've been hearing more and more about that. And, you know, Bob, there's a question about whether, even though the Muslim Brotherhood, we're told, isn't that big, it's not that influential right now in Egypt, even if it only has about 30% influence, that's considerable when you have a power vacuum and you hold elections.
There's no question about that the Muslim Brotherhood is one of the better organized political entities in Egypt, because there was so much pressure to keep others down. I also must say that without endorsing anything about Iran or its government, I agree with the statement of the leader that if the United States loses Egypt, that will reverberate throughout the Islamic world, throughout the Middle East. There are a lot of countries where there are things happening that are a threat to our interest. Jordan, Algeria, Tunisia, Syria, not to mention Egypt. So I think that there's an awful lot hanging in the balance right now.
Judith Miller, what is the Obama administration to do? As we await a statement from the president, he's going to take a couple of questions today. We expect at least one of them to be on Egypt. What is he to do?
Well, Megyn, at the moment he's trying to shift his position from being neutral in the beginning to being on the side of the protesters, on the side of history, as some say. And you've seen an ever more assertive and aggressive response from the White House. I think in this case a little too aggressive at the moment. What Robert Gibbs said, the White House spokesman, about the transition should have begun yesterday, that's not helpful when you're dealing with a man like Hosni Mubarak, whom I know well, who is so very stubborn and is determined to have a dignified exit.
You know, Walid, when I see enemies of America's in the Middle East getting so happy, you know, getting giddy over the prospects, you know, I think I and other Americans get a little nervous, wondering, okay, well, that seems bad. How do we stop that? Are we powerless right now over the events that we're watching in Egypt?
Look, Megyn, I think that the administration in general and the decision makers with regard to the Middle East are several inches behind the events. And let me go 1 inch beyond and project that what the Muslim Brotherhood are really trying to do now is simply to lift the ban to enter any coalition that is going to be in government. The Muslim Brotherhood already are trying to designate which ministries they're going to be in control of. Forget about defense ministry, foreign ministry, even if they get educational ministry. They have their plan basically to form local neighborhood organizations, enter the government, and at the same time connect with Hamas in Gaza and elsewhere.
How can we stop that? We can't stop that.
Well, basically, we as Americans cannot stop that. The only ones who can stop it are two forces in Egypt. They have to be connected for them to be able to stop it. Hosni Mubarak is leaving. His militia at some point will be leaving. You have the army, and you have the secular part of the opposition. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood are very smart. They want to maintain the secular part with them by telling them, oh, we're going to be with you, we are moderate, we're going to go towards election. We know the game. We've seen them before. So we need to have an architecture in Washington that would be smart. Reach out to the army, reach out to a piece of the opposition, and form an interim government. You block the Muslim Brotherhood.
Bob, do you agree that Mubarak's going to go, and he's going to go soon? He's not going to last until September. As we see these crackdowns on journalists, does it suggest that he is becoming more desperate?
I think the odds are marginally in favor of his being forced out before he'd like to go, before the deadline that he set. I don't think that that solves the problem, and I think that one of the things we've seen in the area is that democracy doesn't necessarily produce the desired results. You have democracy in Lebanon, and Hezbollah becomes the dominant faction. You have democracy in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas becomes the dominant faction. You have democracy in Iraq, and God knows how that's going to end up. So it's not only a question of can we get Mubarak to resign before he'd like to, it's a question of what replaces him and what is necessary to quash the disturbances.
Judy, for those who haven't been following this that closely, what do we need to know about Jordan, about Yemen, about Syria? I mean, we just know sort of the Middle East right now is in flux and others are getting nervous, but what should we be watching there?
Well, we need to know, Megan, whether or not this is going to be a domino effect, whether or not what happened in Tunisia and is now happening in Egypt is going to spread to the other Arab countries. And by the way, while the Ayatollah is gloating, I would remind him that he had to suppress his own revolution of 1 million people in the streets.
Yeah.
So I think there's a little trembling going on in Tehran. This is going to be up to the Egyptian people. And I'm hoping, I don't know that this will be the case, but I'm hoping that those 1 million people who have filled the squares of Tahrir and other cities and in places in Egypt can do more than Twitter. I hope they can get their political act together, work with the military to say to the Muslim Brotherhood, you're a part of us, but we want what's best for Egypt, and peace is best for Egypt. I don't think that's impossible. It's true, it may not be likely, but it is not impossible.
You are a brave woman.
I don't disagree.
Sorry,
I don't
Bob,
disagree at all with. Pardon me. I don't disagree at all with my longtime colleague and friend Judith Miller. I may disagree on the odds that it comes out right. Right now, I think it looks like a very bad situation. I don't think that democracy is going to prevail in Egypt, and if it does, we may wish it didn't.
Yeah, we have a different understanding of that term here in the United States. Panel, thank you all so much. Judy, stay safe. Godspeed. All the best.